All right, we will call this August 8th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the July 27th, 2023 meeting minutes.
We do not yet have the meeting minutes. We'll have them for everybody come August. We can do a vote then. Apologies, but we'll have them ready for the next meeting.
Yes, perfect. All right, and then the next item is old business, Mill Point Apartments, conditional use and preliminary plan.
Okay, yes. So Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mill Creek Point Apartments has resubmitted to the township. We have been working with the applicants now for quite some time on a number of aspects of the plan with respect to pedestrian connectivity, the landscaping, specifically buffering, making sure that those who are near the busier roads have effective buffering. We did talk about whether they were going to be a pet-friendly organization. As we always mention, that is incredibly important to discuss, because if so, we like to ensure that there's adequate facilities so it doesn't become a code enforcement issue for our staff, but also for the general public as a whole. So we did find out that there would be a dog run on the site. We do know that there is, as part of the eventual 183 units, there is a proposal for a clubhouse, pool, and other amenities, which are obviously appreciated and will be beneficial for the site. And we also have had discussions in the past about making sure that items such as lighting and other aspects of technical design are managed as well. I would like to applaud the applicants for including walkability throughout the site. Obviously, with that many residents and something as attractive as a pool included on a hot day, you're going to have a lot of people walking to get over to those amenities. There's also a frontage trail proposed on Lower Macungie Road. We always wanted to make sure that there was those improvements in place, specifically so that we could have discussions regarding residents walking to a bunch of the restaurants or the supermarket up the road or whatnot, if they so chose to, as well as the trail down to the creek. And ensuring that the trail down to the creek is also included was incredibly important, seeing that that's a major part of our greenway plan and getting residents down to that asset and down to that park space. I would say outstanding items to date on the plan that we would like to chat with the applicant about in greater detail, specifically involve further discussions on traffic and making sure that mitigation of traffic is appropriately handled. This is a sensitive site due to its location across the street from the middle school. So for those watching remotely, you can see here that this would be the main entrance. And again, the middle school access is right here. Any impact on Lower Macungie Road, which the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission has noted in their long-range planning documents, and we've noted in our long-range planning documents, is going to continue to have background growth. So when we think about East Texas Village and the backup at the light at East Texas Road and Lower Macungie Road, Brookside Road and Lower Macungie Road, and then in the opposite direction over towards the shopping centers, we just want to make sure that that traffic is mitigated and impacted. And the second item of discussion, the applicant has noted several times that they don't intend to touch this area. I'm going to rely on the township engineer to speak to this a little bit more, but obviously there is stormwater on the site. The applicant is proposing basins and stormwater management areas, but we do have an existing situation on the site, and we just want to make sure that there are no adverse impacts from it. We do know right now that it does, due to its source, which is up towards Hamilton Boulevard, it does convey a fair amount of stormwater. And we wanted to make sure that there's no health, safety, or welfare issues as part of that as we contemplate this conditional use, which is written into the conditional use ordinance. So that's an update of where we're at. Again, we've been at this for quite some time. The applicants have graciously given us another 180-day extension so that we can get items hammered out. But at the same time, I'm sure the applicant would like to move along, and I know the township would as well. So that does provide an update with where we're at, and I would like to hand over the rest of the proceedings, or at least staff comments to Brian to give the planning commissioners some background about where we're at with the technical design, and then the planning commission can take it away from there.
All right, thank you, Nate. Yeah, so Nate actually touched on our primary concerns. I mean, he actually already described a lot of the changes throughout the site, the additional walking paths. There's been adjustments to the buildings and other things that we've suggested, and incremental changes over time. We've had this application and reviewed this application many, many times. As Nate had mentioned, our primary concerns really are the traffic generated by the site, and how that's going to be handled with intersection improvements. One of the other ones, I think, just to add to Nate's list, was the proposed signal upgrades to the light at the entrance or across the entrance to the middle school. Just making sure that those signal upgrades are included in this plan, as well as crosswalks and things like that. And then the second item that Nate also touched on is the stormwater management concern, the existing flooding condition on Spring Creek Road. That's identified on the township or the Lehigh County Planning Commission's flood hazard map. It's not identified as a specific hazard. So in particular, the applicant is showing stormwater management basins or areas for basins. I'm sure help mitigate the stormwater from the site improvements, but we'd also like to see you do as much as you can feasibly to help address or at least minimize or mitigate some of that existing flooding condition, since it is directly adjacent to the property. That's it. Thanks, Nate.
Okay, great. This would now be a good time for the applicants, if they wish to introduce themselves. You all can sit up at the table there if you wish. We do need to make use of the microphones so that people who are watching this at home or will watch the recording have the ability to hear the recording. And we just invite you to share with us your current updates about what's going on at the site, your progress to date. And I'm sure our planning commissioners will have some insightful questions for you about how things are moving along at this rate.
Okay, thank you. My name's Kevin Fogarty. I'm the lawyer for the applicant. I'm going to let the engineers speak to the issues that have been raised here. It is correct. This has been going on for quite some time. We've been working hard to try to address, in particular, these two issues that have been brought up tonight, which is traffic and stormwater. Peter, you want to start with the traffic?
Hi, I'm Pete Spizak with Traffic Planning and Design. We had prepared a traffic study. We submitted it to PennDOT in the township. We got review comments and then addressed those comments and resubmitted to the township. Since then, we've gotten the review letter from Andy Heinrich, and basically all of the comments associated with the traffic study itself were satisfied for his review dated July 7th, 2021. 23. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about. Other than that, there are some, minor comments on the site planning, addressing sidewalk and trail, which I would let the site engineer address. But as far as the traffic study is concerned, the intersections that we studied all meet the requirements, all meet the PennDOT requirements. In fact, PennDOT's latest review letter is very minor. There's very minor comments to address. There's nothing in there that can't be addressed. We are proposing left and right turn lanes at the proposed driveway across from the middle school, which will also include, signal upgrades and pedestrian upgrades, all those types of things that would have to go in with, the improvements that PennDOT would ultimately require regardless. It's really all I have. If you guys have any questions on the traffic.
I have one quick question, and I apologize if I'm jumping ahead here. Have you contacted East Penn School District yet about coordination? There's peak hour trips that would probably be during the school year associated with bus drop off. And that could lead to a potential issue in that generalized area. Have you talked to the school district at all as part of your due diligence with this?
Not at this point. We haven't, at least I haven't. You know, that, I feel like that's more of a, like a land development issue at this point. I mean, we're here for conditional use. It's not something that can't be addressed, as this project moves forward, and we will definitely get in touch with them.
So are you saying that the traffic that's going to happen in the morning and at when school lets out in the afternoon has not been included in that traffic study?
Oh, no, the traffic has, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we haven't actually, we didn't,
But I mean, the direct impact and how that would coordinate.
oh, yeah, yeah. The only thing that we didn't do is, and it is, when we scoped this traffic study, we did not look at the school PM peak hour, but we looked at the AM peak hour and the PM peak hour. So, I mean, that was not one of the things that we were told to look at initially.
Okay, the only reason why I bring it up is because if this were to proceed forward to the formalized hearing and we have members of the public who are here, once they receive their public notice, that could be a question that comes up. My child gets dropped off at the school, how is this going to impact? That could affect the process of a conditional use hearing as that goes along. And one thing that we try to do here is think about issues to vet in advance so that as we get to the hearing, items such as that don't become potential logjam items for any hearing or approval or anything like that. So I would highly recommend some interface with the school district or particularly the middle school, just to make sure that you have your bases covered there and that it won't be problematic when the time comes that we're at hearing and abutters get their notices, so on and so forth.
No, understood.
And I would say also having very specific estimations of what traffic would look like during those two peak times, because it's currently already, I don't know what the best word for it is. It's a lot of people at one time trying to get their kid there at whatever the start of school time is. So they're not necessarily the most rational driver at that moment, and anything that would impact them will reflect negatively on you and will definitely come up at those meetings.
Understood.
Is there more to your presentation before I go to public comment?
The only thing that pops into my mind as I'm looking at this is cut through also, because you can't turn left onto Lower Macungie from Spring Creek. So are you guys anticipating people driving through?
So
I mean,
that-
I would do that. I had to pick up a kid at. the
We
school.
didn't anticipate it, but that actually did come up, I believe at the last planning commission meeting that we were at, and we're definitely gonna look into, you know, any kind of traffic calming measures along the internal, you know, roadway there so that it hopefully deters people from trying to cut through there. Because
Mhm.
if you have a bunch of stop signs and a bunch of maybe speed humps or, you know, just, I don't, you know, make it that it would take longer to go that way, people would, you know, try to avoid.
Wouldn't want to, yeah.
Yeah.
But also if we do have a drainage issue and the road gets flooded, I'm drawing a blank on
Spring
what,
Creek.
thank you, gets flooded and you're trying to get to Walmart, people are gonna want to cut through there too, because they can't get through because of the water that gets flooded down there. It gets really bad. So it's something to consider as well.
I think there was comments from the public directly pertaining to traffic. If you want to come up to the mic and introduce yourself.
Mike Siegel, 1939 Astor Road. Several traffic questions and concerns. First, are you planning to extend have you and PennDOT have discussion to extend the pork chop at Spring Creek or Mill Creek Road and Lower Macungie Road to prevent illegal left turns?
We haven't gotten that far with PennDOT. So far, right now, we've submitted a traffic study and they reviewed it. We haven't gotten into like the full design.
I would kindly ask the planning commission make that a condition. That would to prevent illegal left turns. People are currently doing that now, and it's only going to get worse. The second thing, have you done a traffic study to look at the possibility of doing a closed loop system between Crocs Road and your intersection with the school district and Mill Creek and Lower Macungie?
At this point, again, we've only the traffic study, so that's something that we would get into with PennDOT. So we can definitely look at that.
The reason why I bring this up, planning commission members, and again, I'm asking this to be a place as a condition, no matter what discussion comes out of PennDOT, considering their HOP and for the driveway and signalization, it will eventually become Lower Macungee's problem. And my concern is here is during peak hours, especially in the afternoon, it's not just the helicopter moms and dads picking up their children, but it's the release of the school buses that concerns me here. That you're gonna have a massive traffic backup during three o'clock peak hours at this, almost at the same time that Mack Trucks gets out and uses Mill Creek and Spring Creek to get to Hamilton. And what you're going to have is a massive backup from Mill Creek Road all the way to Crocs Road, where the traffic's going to be at a standstill. And unless those traffic signals are properly timed and closed loop together with fiber optic or I'm trying to think of the other word, but Nathan knows what I'm talking about. The
Synchronized.
adaptive traffic.
Adaptive, adaptive.
Yeah, unless we put something like that in that short range, because you essentially have 3 traffic signals within a half a mile. And I know PennDOT objects to that in other municipalities. And we have to have something like that put in along that stretch. I'm worried that the combination of school bus drivers, helicopter moms and dads who are impatient to pick up their children, the Mack truck drivers, and the movie facility down there where Daytimers was, you got too many vehicles being crammed in a short period of time, relying on a traffic signal system that's not working together. The city of Allentown does it. We do it for Hamilton Boulevard. If we don't, we're going to have a massive log jam, traffic jam there, and I'm really concerned about that. The last thing I would like to see rectified with the conditional use is the flooding along Spring Creek Road and making sure that road gets out of the floodplain as much as possible, utilizing the right-of-way that has been, I believe, deeded over to the township over the past few years and moving the road on a higher ground so we can put a culvert underneath Spring Creek Road to eliminate some of the overtopping of the floods. If that can't be done, I'm asking the township to maybe ask the applicant to put in some type of floodgates down there. I'm more worried you're gonna have 180 units of apartments and most of those apartments are going to be composed of single families, starter families. They're not 55 and older, and these people are going to be utilizing Mill Creek Road to get wherever they want to go. And if that road is flooded, I'm worried about somebody drowning on that road. So PennDOT knows it's flooded. I actually had PennDOT put up the flood warning signs along Spring Creek Road in that area. Also had the township put up flood signs in there. So far, we haven't had another bus flooded down there because there have been buses trapped down there that are flooded along Spring Creek Road. And I want to make sure that this applicant who's bringing, 500 residents into this area become familiar enough to know that that road floods at night. I'm not saying about during the day. We all can see that. I'm worried about traveling down there at night when we don't have street lights down there or anything else. And that's another thing you may want to ask the applicant to do is light that road up so people can see that the road is actually flooded at night.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
I was just thinking as Mr. Siegel was mentioning some comments, we have 2 new planning commissioners who are currently serving and just recently came on board with the board. We're thanking them for their service. We also probably have some members of the public who are either currently watching or may watch this in the future. I think it would actually be incredibly helpful if we could get just a brief overview of the site, but also when we were talking about traffic, I know things that we've discussed in the past that I think would be relevant to share with our new planning commissioners and maybe new residents who might be watching this, such as the discussion point and actually the applicant answering these questions in the past regarding traffic at the intersection of East Texas Road and Lower Macungie Road, traffic at the intersection of Lower Macungie Road and Brookside Road, because I know that was a concern previously, but also just the site itself. I have the map up here, and I think it would be helpful for the new members and then also for members of the public to just get a quick reintroduction to it. Because I think we're diving in pretty deep onto the deep end of the project for a lot of newer folks here who have been watching this. So could we take 5 minutes to just do that?
Sorry about that.
Sure. So for the applicants.
Just a brief overview.
Applicants, most of those comments were just directed towards you. Are you able to give a very brief, just synopsis of the project? That's what you were going for. Okay. Making sure. It'll help 2 new members, myself, the public, everyone involved.
So as everybody has discussed.
Yeah, can you bring the microphone closer to you, please? Thank you.
All right, so as everybody was giving a little bit of brief in the beginning, the project's been in front of the planning commission, their professionals going to PennDOT for quite some time, over probably a 1.5 to 2-year period at a minimum. So we've been going back and forth with a lot of the concerns that were brought up and trying to address those. And typically this type of thing doesn't last this long to get to the point that we are now. But we, as the developers here, are very conscientious and want to make sure that we do address a lot of the problems that you were looking at, and also the general public. So what we did is, the original plan had single family homes way back. We had a by right type of use. I think it was somewhere around 75, 87 units, single family homes. We're obviously 180 with the proposal that's in front of you. And I'll let the traffic engineer explain a little bit more of that, but the ADT for a single family home is a lot higher than an apartment. So typically ITE will say 10 trips per day for a single family home. I think we're maybe at 8 or 7, between 7 and 8 with an apartment. And that might even be on the high side. So in actuality, we're looking at very de minimis amount of traffic that this is going to be versus a single family home development on this site. So regardless of, if somebody's thinking 180 units here, it's really not a traffic impact, because a 75 unit or 87, I'm sorry, would also have a very large impact. So, and that's a permitted use by right. So the layout that we came out with is what you see on the screen and in front of you in your packages, I'm assuming. We looked at this quite a bit and tried to come out with some sort of a configuration that would work for the development and for stormwater purposes, traffic purposes, and a sidewalk and trail system that would meet the needs of the developer and also meet the needs of the township. So what we have now is we have a sidewalk on both sides throughout the internal park. We have shown that also a bike path connection running the total length of Lower Macungie Road, and then also down Spring Creek Road. There was some discussion as far as what we were doing for Mill Creek Road and connecting down along there, but we'll get into that maybe a little bit later. The stormwater aspects, which is the topic of, the flooding. Obviously, the flooding has been there historically. We meet DEP, we meet township, we meet all the other requirements. And I think we're even going above and beyond by trying to irrigate the stormwater as it is. So what the system now shows is large holding ponds, and that water will then be pumped out onto the open areas of the development. So they're not going in the ground just in case there are some CARTS features. They're really going to get sprinkled on top, just like a normal rain event. It gets held for a day or two until after that precipitation event goes. And again, and then it goes out onto the grass areas in the development. DEP requires
Sorry, I should mention, we are running on generators right now. There is a fair amount of the township that is without power. We have emergency generators here at the township that keep our internet and power running, but PPL is working out there. So we'll try and get everything up and running again, but apologies. We didn't want to cancel tonight's meeting while they were working, so. Yeah, I'm gonna set everything back up. Yeah. Sorry, everybody. I think that might have been PPL coming back online. Believe we have a 3-day emergency generator here, so there's no way it ran out of diesel because we're considered an emergency site. So I bet it's the PPL coming back on. Yeah. Let me tell you, Vince is special ops here. All right.
We're good.
Is everybody's microphone working? Okay. So it took a couple of seconds, but we are back up and running. Apologies for that. But again, hopefully we are now back to regular power service. So
So you were just finishing talking about the
Some stormwater.
stormwater.
Yeah,
yes.
so what we did is, obviously, we knew the existing condition down there. These gentlemen have been farming this property for many years. They know the condition and they know the history of the site. So we took everything into account. We didn't want to have any sinkholes, so that's the reason why we're doing the spray irrigation. And DEP requires you to hold that 2-year storm, 3.14, I think, inches of rain. So if you think of a 2-year storm is not necessarily a storm that happens every 2 years. It's just, it's a gauge basically to say what those are. So we're handling and cannot leave that storm off the site ever. That has to stay and infiltrate into the ground. So in retrospect, you're going to see less water on the smaller storms get to the creek. You're going to still meet some higher storm events that are going to go down through piping and ponds and swales and things like that. But in the overall, the average storm is going to be held on site and you're going to have a less ratio of storm that's allowed to get down there. So if it was, I'm going to just put it in more plain terms, if it was 100 gallons of water that was coming off the site before, if we're at a 70-30, we're only allowed 7 gallons or 3 gallons to come off at certain times. So we are working on that property. We're not making the existing condition any worse, and we're infiltrating it, and we're going to be meeting all the township requirements, all the DEP requirements, all the conservation requirements, Act 167, so on and so forth. And that all gets taken care of in the land development problem. It is a big concern here, and I totally understand it, but we're not shortcutting any of that. We're going to be taking care of what we can take care of. Obviously, there's a large channel that goes through that traverses additional water through our property. There's not much that we can do with that, but we can take care of what we can take care of. So that's what we did. And I think that these developers have been working very hard, to do that. And then, for landscaping and buffering, we have it, through the Lower Macungie Road and Spring Creek Road. They're being buffering, and you don't see We have a winding bike path through there, and a connectivity into our development and a connectivity then basically to the west for the path. There's already an existing path going down towards, the creek on the opposite side. We're doing widening on the roads as required when it goes through that land development, so on and so forth. But, again, we'll be buffering, making this a clean and green as much as possible site, for DEP requirements. And obviously, we want to make it a nice site that he can, market this in a positive light. If anybody else has any general questions as far as the overall layout, I'm more than happy.
Any questions from members of the commission?
I assume you own the property all the way over to Mill Creek, the extension? And
Yes.
I assume there's no plans for phase 3 because of the 100-year and 500-year?
Not at this time, no.
I may say something just to put a face to a name here. I'm a trustee of the Dan Weber Land Trust, and there were two things that we wanted right from the beginning. We did not want to look, if it was permitted, 3-story buildings, because we don't think it fits the area. And another thing we wanted, might seem minor, but we wanted that every single unit would have a garage and there would be as many corner units as possible. So we tried to have, as you can see, there's a lot of, 6-unit buildings. Just keep things relatively low key as opposed to like a really urban, apartment project. It seems ironic from that standpoint, talking about apartments, but we want to do that. May not be best for the bottom line, but we thought it's best for the community.
So for those who weren't at the planning, this is rendering what the units are projected to look like. Very sorry, sir. Yes. So for those of you who weren't here before, a refresher, this is, a view of what the proposed units are going to look like. There are going to be 30 of these buildings scattered throughout the property. They are 6-unit buildings. And as he said, they're going to have garages for each one.
And then a single entrance for each unit, though? Okay, so there's a single entrance. It's not a single entrance where multiple people are.
Yeah, we didn't want that either.
Okay,
You can't see them all, but there's some on the side.
Yep.
Yes.
okay. So individual entrances.
There's 6.
So this is more of a carriage home community than an apartment community, would you say?
It has similarities.
I only say that because we've processed a land development for another development that's proposing similar units and they're calling them carriage homes. So it just seems kind of in line. Okay. Well, we appreciate the time from everybody on this one. I think I can speak for the planning commission. I know I can speak for staff when I say that we appreciate everyone's willingness to work with us on this. Obviously, this is a very large development in a prominent area of the township. And as everyone is also aware, we've worked very closely with numerous other developers over the past 5 years or so with fairly large developments that have been proposed, where we want to make sure that when it comes time to have hearing, potential issues are addressed in advance of that to ensure concern is mitigated in advance of any type of an approval. I think from a staff perspective, what I would recommend to the planning commission tonight is if the applicants are requesting to, at this point, feel like they have made enough headway in terms of comments and questions and concerns from the township engineer and staff, that we could, at the staff level, as we generally do, put together a recommendation for conditions of approval to send along to the Board of Commissioners. And I could deliver that to the planning commission and the applicants in time for the next meeting to go over the conditions, which is generally a fairly common practice for us. So we would deliver a recommended through a memorandum from staff of possible conditions of approval. We would share them with the planning commission. We would share them with the applicants with a potential vote in September.
That's what we request.
Okay. Is it possible between now and that time, you would have the ability to reach out to the school district to be able to address that question? And if it comes up at the next meeting?
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
Thank you, especially with school starting in just a few weeks' time.
No, I appreciate it. I think, from a purely legal standpoint, the requirements under 2406Y. I think we've met those for a while with regard to those specific requirements. I think the more general requirements, particularly relating to traffic and stormwater, have taken more. But I think, again, subject to talking to the school district about that issue, I think we've done everything humanly possible on the other two, on all other aspects of those other two.
So is everybody amenable then to meeting back here again at our September meeting, looking at the conditions and sending it along to the Board of Commissioners after that potentially?
Makes sense to me. So
It's
we'll
fine with us.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll
all
look
right.
for a motion to table it then?
Yes.
Either of you want to make the motion? We'll call for a member of the public if you want to come back up here.
You only allowed me to talk about traffic issues before. I would like to mention about the stormwater issue.
That's fine.
I absolutely agree that the developer has done everything he can on his own property to prevent additional stormwater from coming down into that conveyance well. I want the public who are listening and others that conveyance swell is one of the most important swales in the entire Lehigh Valley. It carries the Army Corps channel through Walmart, carries all the stormwater from Air Products, from 222, from 78, and it all comes down on this poor gentleman's property. I feel for him, but he's done what he can. He's worked with the Conservation District. He stopped plowing through that swale. It's starting to restabilize, and I'd like to see that continue with the conservation plan as part of the conditions that western side stay as a conservation plan in a natural riparian area, and allowing the developer to plant additional riparian plants and landscaping just for that area, and it never be plowed for any reason whatsoever. The second thing is that area is a migration area for geese and other wild birds in there. I don't know if he's ever sat out there after a spring thaw, but there's literally tons of geese out there, and snow geese and other birds and animals and deer that cross through that riparian area. So I like to see that looked at as a condition of actually maintaining that as an open space. I know there's been discussion about putting mitigated wetlands from other projects in there, and that's an excellent location for it. And I wish him well with DEP doing that. The last thing I'm concerned about is for his project in itself, and that is keeping such an attractive riparian area from becoming an attractive nuisance to the hundreds of children that are going to be in and around that area, not only from the school, but from the living in the apartment complex. I would ask that they consider putting an 8-foot fence along there, because once that becomes flooded, it becomes an attractive nuisance for every child to go down there and potentially be swept away. So I absolutely would like to see that made as a condition, that the applicant put a fence around the western side of his project to prevent not only the children in that project from being attracted to that area when it's flooded, but to keep other people out of there so he doesn't become a liability, and neither does it for the township. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment? And then I can't see it online, but do we have anyone that is watching online?
We have individuals watching online, but per the Board of Commissioners policy at this point in time, individuals are allowed to watch online, but however, we are no longer taking comments online.
Okay.
That's per our Board of Commissioners policy for our televised meetings.
Sounds good. All right, then we will entertain that motion to table.
I will motion to table.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We have 3 ayes. All right, so we will see you at the next planning commission meeting.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is 7505 Albertus Road. If you'd like to come up to the table.
Yep, as the applicants come up to the table here, we will get the plan together. to show to members of the public watching from home.
Great, even better. Perfect.
So try to hit it both ways.
Yes.
Pass them right on out. Yep. Much.
You can have the fancy.
Should note, this is the PowerPoint that I believe was submitted
Oh,
as
yeah.
part of everybody's packet.
All right, so we have the West Campus in front of us. So you're bringing the East Campus to us. There we go. East side it is.
For members of the public here this evening or those watching from home, Al Maqasid, there are two items on the agenda. We should note that there's the existing approved via special exception East Campus along Albertus Road. As the agenda notes, there is now a proposed West Campus on an additional lot at the northwest corner of Shinnick Road and Albertus Road. So for lack or for clarity for those watching now or in the future, we have two proposals and we will be moving out of order. We will start with the other campus per the request of the app.
Yeah, and this is the 737, 7368, 7386, and 7394 Albertus Road that we're talking about now, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
please. The reason I'm asking for that, Wes, is that the East Campus is the area that we received previous approvals for, and it'll set the tone for what we're going to be discussing on the West Campus.
Makes sense to me.
And because we have new planning commission
Yes.
members and we figured we will start and kind of get a sense of what's there now, what was approved before and what they're proposing to do so that everybody's on the same page. Because we couldn't remember whether you even were here last time or not,
Yes.
Wes. So we figured,
Yep.
So go ahead.
Sounds
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Starting with the East Campus, then, this is located along Albertus Road. If you look at the first slide there, the first sheet, there's actually three parcels that were combined with what was in the 2016 El Maqasid, but 3P Properties purchased the two properties on the east here. There was a single family home and then there was another home on the property that they purchased. And then they went in and started their seminary and religious learning center on these properties. In 2020, they acquired the property, the farm property to the west. And we got approval for them to expand the seminary and learning center onto that property. And you can see the area here is, that area was zoned industrial. And to the north of that is a large warehouse. And to the northwest of that is, we have Valley South Industrial Park. To the immediate west of the farmhouse property is property that's owned by Air Products. They had a plan that was previously submitted to the township for a warehouse light manufacturing use. That has not been reviewed or has not been yet approved by the township. There is, as part of what they've done so far, they rehabilitated the old single-family home. They're using that now for part of their religious and learning center. And they're in the process of renovating the single-family home and will be converting that over to a apartment dormitory type use. And they will be rehabilitating the barn, adaptively reusing that to make classrooms and a commons area out of that. Part of what we were going to be asking for with this, and we'll get into that as we move forward through here, is some temporary use of this property as they proceed with that. Moving on to the next site, you can see what's there right now. You can see the existing barn that's going to be adaptively reused, the house that has been converted to their learning center. On the lower right-hand corner is the farmhouse that's going to be used as part of the campus, and the single-family home that's going to be converted to a 3-story apartment building. The next slide shows you a little bit more about the property itself. Even though the property total is over 17 acres, a good bit of the property is in the floodplain in Swabia Creek. And we have to be conscious of what we're doing there as far as where the 100-year floodplain is, where the 500-year floodplain is with this property, and what the floodway is. If you look at the next slide, this shows you what the master plan is, which was approved as part of the 2020 approvals that we received from the township. This is the master plan for the campus. What this was set up to do is to be able to handle 400 students, part of the seminary and learning center. And you can see the different buildings, the dormitory, and the various uses. We'll get into what that they're looking to use at the campus, and John will go into a little more explanation of what how the campus is going to be used in the future. The next slide shows a more graphic view and talks a little bit more about the 2020 approval that we received, and that we're totaling, about 63,100 square foot on the ground floor, and we have 4 stories on some of these buildings. And we have classrooms, dorms, gym, prayer room. We're going to do underground parking with this, and we're eventually going to have underground detention in conjunction with this. And as you can see, this is a major project that's going to take many years for them to be able to raise the funds for and to be able to construct.
And just something to note about the zoning approval in 2020 was done with the support of the township at that time. And some of the relief was related to them, some of the accessory things that would happen on the property, not having specific use categories in the zoning ordinance that covered it. So they sort of got a special exception and a number of different variances in order to build what is being shown. And I raised that because a similar thing is going to have to happen for the other campus.
And the access to the site is, we're going to have one additional access onto Albertus Road that we will need to get a PennDOT highway occupancy permit for. The underground parking will come out onto this. Also, we are proposing a fire lane that will go around the rear of the property that will come out onto Albertus Road. And we're also proposing access onto Shonik Road. We did have some discussion so far. We were looking at the possibility of a bus stop out along Albertus Road, but LAN is telling us at this point in time, they do not have a bus route out here. So that's something that may wait till the future sometime when the Atlanta decides they are going to have bus routes in this area.
I think the next slide will show those access.
Yeah.
There you go.
And, we had, with the original plan, we had 153 underground parking, but the only reason that we had approval for so few parking spaces with 400 students is it's not proposed that the students will have vehicles. They'll be living on site with the dormitories. We'll have dormitory space for the 400 students, but we will need parking for staff and for, the support folks for the property. And then as we get into talking about the West Campus, we'll have additional parking on that side. So we may eliminate some of this parking that we're looking at on the East Campus. Next slide, 2 slides show the floor plan for these buildings as they were originally contemplated. I'm not going to go into much detail on that now, but they do give you an idea of how the campus was going to be laid out, the various functions on the campus. Generally, it's what you would expect for like a college campus. So it's going to have all those functions that a college campus would have. It would have it, and John will explain further, but it's going to be as self-supporting as possible. Then the next, the next sheet shows the various uses that they'll be using on the site. This gives you a better idea of everything that, to make it self-sufficient, the accessory uses that they'll have as part of the seminary and the learning center as they're looking there. From an education standpoint, between the 2 campuses, they're going to be looking for educational facilities that run from 2 years old up through college and senior adult age education programs. They will have, in conjunction with this, they'll have some apartments for their staff and for missionaries that they have come on the campus. They'll have dormitories and boarding for their students. They're proposing to have recreation uses with trails and other recreation facilities. They're going to have sports facilities. They'll have some retail that'll be related primarily just to the campus, such as bookstores, gift shops, convenience groceries, types of facilities, coffee shops, snack bars, cafeteria. For services, they're going to have like a barber, hairdresser, they'll have laundry, dry cleaning services, they'll have medical, first aid, they'll have security, they'll have office space to support facilities they have going on. They're going to have performance and entertainment type facilities on campus there, auditorium, theater, multimedia studio. And then they have a whole list of other activities, arts and crafts, daycare. They're going to have retreats, we have worship services, environmental services, training, agricultural training, parking. They're talking about possibly having a museum, a research center, renewable energy type uses. So it's a whole general facilities that they'll have to be able to have a self-sustaining campus here. And this is, they're looking at this for both sides of the roadway. Some majority of these items were approved in the 2020 special exception that we received. We're going to be looking though to add additional items that were not covered in the 2020 approval. That's part of what we're going to be requesting from the zoning hearing board.
Basically an expansion of the previous special exception use.
Yes. So to be able to accomplish this is going to take some time to do. So we're going to be staging this, and that's part of what the request that we're going to be making to the zoning hearing board. The first stage of this is we're going to, as I mentioned, they're going to be looking at doing that apartment and dormitory type unit out of the single family home. They're going to be looking at doing the barn and converting that over. In the interim, while they're doing that, they're going to be looking at possibly bringing in some mobile classrooms while the barn's being converted. And those mobile classrooms will only be on site there as long as they'll till the barn is converted over. They have the classrooms in the barn. They're going to be looking at from what the plan right now that's under design is they'll have 3 classrooms and restrooms on the first floor, 3 classrooms and restrooms on the second floor, and a commons area, restrooms on the third floor of the barn area that they're going to adaptively reuse. So that was the first phase of construction, along with the detention pond and some temporary parking that they're doing. And we'll also be doing the fire lane, the sanitary facility. We'll probably start the soccer field, as part of that first phase. In the second phase, when the barn is completed, they'll be adding the parking, temporary parking, and adding some temporary dormitory units. One of the things that's important with the dormitory units, we're going to be working with the township to develop this to look more like a small village. They want to use a high-class type module dormitory units that they'll bring in temporarily until they can build the first phase of the project. To build the first phase of the project is going to be an expensive item for them, so they're going to have to raise funds for that. They're estimating right now the first phase of the project may cost about $30 million, probably take about 3 years to raise the funding for that. So in the meantime, they're probably going to need to have these dormitory units for probably the period of time that it takes to raise the funds and the period of time it's going to take from the build the first building. That first building is shown on the next slide as phase 3. So the dormitories will be in place for approximately maybe 3 or 4 years while this building in the rear gets constructed. As soon as that's constructed and can be occupied, that'll be able, the dormitories are going to be set up to handle about 80 students. This dormitory can handle approximately 200 students. So at that point in time, these more module units will be removed and they'll occupy this as part of their development at that point in time. So part of what we have to do with to be able to accomplish this, we're going to have to get approval from the zoning hearing board to have these module units in place for more than the 1 year period of time that's allowed by the zoning ordinance. We're going to have to get approval for the temporary parking lot that you can see that this dormitory unit's going in over top of where we had that parking in the previous phase. So we want to only do a gravel parking area temporarily. We're going to be doing this temporary detention pond that's going to get removed later. So we're going to be in you to get a land development approval for these temporary items, but we also going to need to get zoning approval prior to us need to get zoning approval before us being able to come into you with land development approval. In the meantime, we also have to get approval from DEP and Conservation District for the NPDS permit for this work. And we also need to get approval for extension of the water line over this area and the other utilities that we need for this work. Just for the future then, once they move past this, like I said, we're probably talking, a 3-year period to raise the funds and a 2-year period to build this. So we're talking about possibly like 5 years out to build this section of the building. Then from there, phase 4, they're going to be doing the expansion of the gym area, behind the barn to add the gym to it. And then phase 5 is to do the office complex and medical center and some of the other computer center and some of the other items that there do between the farmhouse and the gym area. And then in phase 6, they'll totally eliminate the detention pond and finish the other dormitory area, which also will accommodate an additional 200 students at that point in time. So you can see it's a long-term project for them to do it all, and we do need to do it on an interim basis to be able to accomplish it. Also, in conjunction with this, with the master plan, they are going to be looking at using some of the rest of the properties. They have other site amenities that they'll be doing. They'll be looking at using some of doing some improvements out in the floodplain area for recreational facilities, things that will be allowed by the zoning ordinance. We've been working with Vince to decide what could be done out there, what the township ordinance allows us to be done. There were a couple of things they were originally planning that we would not be able to do, like livestock that we decided would not be able to be done in the floodplain area because DEP and both the township did not allow that to happen. But with the things that they can, like the camping and some of the other environmental trails and things like that, they will be doing in that area. And then we did provide some additional information on the traffic. These numbers are high because, as we said, they won't. The students will not have vehicles. The traffic for this will only be for staff for this side of the roadway. So this was give you an overview of the existing campus and what we're proposing to do. And as we said, we did have the special exception that was approved in 2020 for this use. We do have to get the additional approval for the temporary use for the parking for the module units for more than the 1 year period of time that's in the zoning. So we'll be coming back to you next month to talk about that and see what can, get your recommendation for that at that point in time. But we did want to give you the idea of what this campus is going to look like. And then we could go on to the West Campus and discuss that. The situation with the West Campus is that now that they're looking at this, to be able to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, before you transcend into that, and I was hoping for a pause there, but I have a number of questions. I'm sure others do as well. I know that this has already been reviewed, but since this is more of just a synopsis moment to try and get everyone on the same page, let's start with either of you. Any of you have questions that you want to start with, or Brian, if you had questions that you wanted to dig into, you had brought it up.
With I had points. One, I see that in phase two, you have that parking. One, I honestly, this is a beautiful plan. It really is. And, honestly, the renderings are absolutely beautiful. I think this is really great what you guys are putting forward. And it's a really nice overall vision. But I noticed you have a parking area in phase two of, if you just kind of flip through the phases, yeah, you have a rather large parking area in phase two. So there's obviously a need for parking on campus. And then the next phase that parking all disappears, that's all going underground. Is that the intent?
Eventually, there is parking that is going to be underneath. Per the original plan, there's parking underneath all these buildings.
Under all the buildings?
Yeah.
All right,
So we're not gonna, and I don't want to jump ahead here, but I also noticed that the west side, when we look at that, that's gonna have parking as well. Is that's also gonna be shared with this as well as the underground parking?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's an important thing to know. We'll get to that when we get,
Yeah.
but okay.
I just wanted to, like, the underground parking is a little concerning just because you're right next to the floodplain. I would be concerned about having vehicles under a building and then also being under a flood, like you're right next to the floodplain and then if you're building your parking garage is in the basement, floods, your parking garage is gonna get flooded out. It seems like a concern from
The parking is
functionality
going to be
standpoint.
above the 500-year floodplain
So the-
elevation.
Then you'd end up with the parking being almost the first floor and then the rest of the floors above that.
Yeah, it still puts us below the elevation of Albertus Road.
Okay.
We have the parking elevation and then the roadway is about equivalent to what our first floor elevation is going to be. So you'll have the parking, then you have your first floor, the Albertus Road's about that elevation in here.
Okay.
Are you better talking?
Yeah.
Adjust. In the meantime, this is the booklet that was put together as part of the original plan. I'll pass this around. You guys can look at it as we're going through some of the rest of it, but this shows all the floors and shows a little more detail.
My name is John Rodas. I'm the founding director of Al Maqasid. I was saying one of the things it doesn't show on the flat screen, there's a bit of a contour to the land, so it slopes down towards the back as you get closer. So thus that you'll see it that the buildings closer to Albertus Road are actually that the overall height is the same, but they get taller as you move to the back. And I think there was we were permitted to go up to 50 feet and then we received a variance for that, if I'm not mistaken.
And I love how you use the existing buildings, these existing barn. I mean, honestly, incorporating that into these structures is awesome. But with this phase three in that large building, you're putting parking. So the parking obviously is first grade. That's a little bit of a concern. The other piece of this is the building is shown in the floodplain. And I just want to point out that FEMA is it's very difficult to get approvals through FEMA to relocate the floodplain in this area. That's going to be a task in itself to change the grading of the site and to get approvals through FEMA. It's at least a year or two worth of just working through that federal agency to get that floodplain relocated for some of the buildings.
We're not touching the 100-year, Brian, and that's what's regulated by FEMA.
Phase 5, I want to say, when you get, so I guess then that leads into phase 5 and 6 where the stormwater basin is. When you
Yeah, they're going to have to change. There was the original plan, we're showing on these plans now the floodplain as we identified it with the recent survey work that we've done out there. The architect's going to have to modify the original footprint that they had for the building to keep some of the building out of the
So you're
floodplain.
going to make adjustments to the.
Yeah, they're going to have to
building.
adjust the
You're
floodplain.
not moving the floodplain. You're not going through FEMA. You're going to make adjustments. to the
Yes.
building. Okay.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah,
and
the floodplain got a little closer to Albertus Road with the last round of elevation work that we did out there.
Okay. And then as far as where that temporary basin is, that disappears in phase 6.
That temporary base is going to go in as early as we get the approval. So that's probably going to go in phase 2 and it's going to stay probably to phase 6. phase six, we're gonna eliminate it before we build these buildings.
Where's it going?
It's gonna go underground, it's gonna go underneath.
Underneath the building? Never seen that before. Never seen a basin underneath a building.
It's more of an urban design. Unfortunately, with the 17 acres that we have here, we
Mhm.
only have about 4 or 5 acres, or maybe less than that, that's actually not in the 500-year floodplain.
Yeah. I just, putting a basin under building is, I've never seen that before. It's just it's bold, I guess. It's going to be very expensive, extremely
Yes.
expensive.
All in all, they're estimating that this is probably gonna be $100 million campus, so it's all said and done. That's why it's gonna take a few years for them to build it out. And that's why they're gonna need some time to get it all up and operating.
My only other question was, why temporary trailers at the beginning? Why not just build? Obviously, you're working on revamping the existing structures, which is a great use. But then why not move to build that structure that goes between the two buildings instead of spending money on temporary trailers at all, just move directly to the first structure?
This first structure is gonna take about $30 million to build. And they're figuring that's gonna take them about 3 years to be able to raise the funds, to be able to build it, Brad. Then they feel they're gonna, based on their growth right now, they're gonna need dormitory space prior to that. They need some place for those students to go in the meantime. They do, but it is, we know that temporary dormitory is an issue with the township, and we will work with staff to come up with a village type setting there and with good quality units and stuff that it doesn't look out of place, that it will work with the rest of the campus, because it will be in place 3 or 4 years till this building gets built.
Thank you. I know that was a little out of my lane as from an engineering perspective. Some of those were not engineering related
Yeah.
questions.
It's,
But it was just, I was looking at the plan. I was
we've been
curious,
spending,
so-
Judd will let you know when
Thank you.
when
I
he
appreciate
speaks,
it.
he'll let you know,
Thank you.
but we've been spending a lot of time talking about how to get this accomplished and what their needs are. But as they're moving forward here, they're gonna need this before they can raise the funds to be able to build this first building.
So I think one good thing that would be a good background, and I appreciate Bud and the applicants bringing this up, is some time ago, special exception was granted by the zoning hearing board. Township did appear in favor of it. This was reviewed by the planning commission for the full campus. And we commended and continue to commend the adaptive reuse of the existing structures, really embracing the creek and making that part, as much as you can from a regulatory perspective, making it part of the campus. And the overall setting with the new structures and the learning center / college / seminary use that's being proposed here. What we are now looking at that I think is new, right, which is why they're back in front of us, is this phasing plan, which was not contemplated as part of the original approval, but makes perfect sense for us to be contemplating when you think of something of this size and scale. We had a pre-application meeting that did speak about the temporary nature of this phasing. And the reason why I'm bringing it up to the planning commission and as well as for the applicant is this, as far as the use and this, as far as this level of phasing, is new for the township. The proposals of the temporary use, which our ordinance only calls for a year, and how we are going to contemplate that and procedurally handle that from an ordinance perspective, from a legal perspective, is something that we're still working through and talking to our township solicitor about how we can best advise the planning commission, how we can best advise the zoning hearing board as the township, et cetera, and figuring out how we are going to make any type of recommendation, which the planning commission needs to do for special exceptions, to be then sent to the zoning hearing board. So we felt that it would be worthwhile this evening to get an overview of the project itself for our new planning commissioners and for members of the public who are not familiar with the project, because it's been a number of years since you all have been before us. for a planning commission meeting, especially now because we do it via Zoom and everybody can watch online. But also how we are going to discuss the phasing, how we are going to discuss a temporary basin, the temporary parking, the temporary dormitories in a mobile home or whatever the end structure is, how long they're going to be there, how we can work with the applicant to regulate it, and if it's going to be a matter of concern. Because one thing that I brought up with the applicants during a pre-application meeting before this was submitted to us, and I have no problem stating to everyone here, is we as a planning commission and we as a staff need to think at a township-wide level. This proposal right here, as a phased construction for this campus, it makes sense as they're presenting it to us. But now we need to take that school of thought about these temporary uses, temporary housing, and what if that were employed or applied for by another applicant somewhere else in the township, that it might not be this particular use or in a different area of the township, not under the auspices of a pre-existing special exception for this type of a campus, and how we would handle that. So I wish it was clear cut. I wish it was a perfectly linear thing, but we have to consider it from a multitude of angles. The angle of how we are going to make it work under this pre-approval, which the township supported and continues to support, but also how does it impact the rest of the community and other parcels of land and other users, and could it impact that? So I can report that we've been talking about that with the township solicitor's office, our zoning officer and deputy community development director, Vince Trangucci, is here this evening just to watch the proceedings, to get used to everything as far as how we're going to proceed forward with the special exception for this particular proposal at this point in time, and how we are going to handle it from an administrative standpoint on the zoning end. So we are thinking about this fairly consistently because we want to get it right. And we want to make sure we're doing the right thing by the applicants. And we're also doing the right thing by the residents and the businesses in the community everywhere else in Lower Macungie Township. So I appreciate the presentation this evening. I think it's incredibly helpful for our new planning commissioners and members of the public. And I think it's going to give everybody, at least as far as the East Campus right now, something to digest, so that moving forward next month, and then as they would need to go to the zoning hearing board, we have advice at the staff level for the planning commission, and we know how we're going to move forward. And we might have an administrative meeting with the applicants between now and then as well, so we can continue to advise the planning commission at the September meeting. So that's just the global overview. I apologize for the length of it, but we wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of everything that's been going on to lead up to the presentation tonight.
And to add to what Nathan is saying, I think, and I'm going to let John speak here, but I think this is unique for them also. And I think this may be a unique facility in the United States for what they're doing here. So John, you want to give them an overview of what you see this being and how you see this functioning in the future?
My name is John Rodas. Again, I'm the founding director of Al-Maqasid. I'll do my best to be brief because I'm very passionate about this project. Al-Maqasid is an Arabic word that essentially means goals or aims or even objectives. And we are primarily an educational institution. And it's unique in that we're serving two different communities, if you wish. The first is with the seminary, which we're conceiving of as, broadly speaking, 18 and older. And the draw there will be a national draw. We currently have students from all over the United States of America, but we also are simultaneously serving a local community of people that are from this particular area and then continue to move into the area. And thus the idea, as you will see shortly with the West Campus and kind of the short-term version of that on the existing campus, where we are conceiving of education for starting early as 2 and all the way then up to 18 through high school. And one of the things that we're finding is that potentially could grow that fairly fast as well, maybe even faster than the seminary, which was news to us when we first started this project and became incorporated as a 501c3 back in 2013. So essentially, we're an educational institution that is unique in that sense that we're serving these two diverse communities. And the landscape of Islamic education in the United States, that requires a little bit of history. I'll just keep it very brief. There's not too many Islamic seminaries in the United States. There's a few that I could point to in different places, but this is a new phenomenon. And this is part and parcel of the growing population of Muslims all throughout the US and the needs for religious education, kind of in line with what would be similar to a Bible college or a Catholic seminary, or even like a yeshiva from the Jewish tradition. And so what's unique here is that we don't just accept 18-year and older students. We also have worship services, which are the 5 daily prayers, and a Friday prayer, which is akin to like a Saturday or Sunday worship service, where the local people come and attend. And what also is unique about what we're doing is that we have a very holistic perspective. And what that means for us is that we try to approach religion not in some compartmentalized type fashion, is that we want to really train the next generation of Muslims in this country to engage at every level of society. So we speak often of that, this idea of principled engagement and principled interaction. And what that requires is not just a religious education, but also to be aware of the various facets of life. We envision eventually things even maybe like vocational training. We encourage people to get out and to also experience nature, and that various other dimensions concerned about their health, diet, nutrition, and things of this nature, which might not always be in a religious institution, Islamic or otherwise. So thus you saw the long list of the things that we would hope to have on our campus. And to the extent possible, as was mentioned, terribly sorry, I'm still overcoming a sickness and quite congested. The long list of items on the list where we want the experience to be such that students don't have to go offsite, especially since that will be limiting them to, unless there's a special need to not have a car. And then also that there will be also a community dimension of that. So when we have a gym and a weight room and aerobics and, self-defense training, jujitsu, martial arts, things of this nature, that we can provide that for the students on site, whether in addition to the religious education that we also, which is going to be one of that's very contextualized, also these other dimensions that they're exposed to, and even things like farming, getting back in nature, and things of this sort. So this is really the core idea behind this project, and that we thank you for always being so gracious, and we've had such a wonderful experience with this township from the very beginning, from the time that I remember when Sarah Pandel was here, and that the early days with Maury and a number of the others. We've had a wonderful reception by you all, and that we continue to be very grateful for that.
I have just a few brief questions, but maybe we want to go into the west portion, or do others want to ask questions pertaining to the east?
It might be easier to hear the West
Okay.
too,
then
and
wrap it up.
then, because I think some of it might be
Yeah,
more
I mean,
global.
Each time you speak, a lot of my questions go away.
Yeah.
Let's start with the west.
Okay, on the West Campus, the reason for this and the reason that we're in front of you is we do need conditional use approval for this, for expanding the use. As I mentioned before, even though on the East Campus, we have 17 acres, very small percentage of that land is usable for buildings and for parking and things like that. So they've been looking at other areas where they can expand the campus. And as John mentioned, they are getting a lot of expected use out of the younger students, the 2 to 18-year-old students. So they're looking at location where they can do some of that. And the property across the street on the northwest corner of the intersection of Albertus Road and Shonik Road is available for sale. There's 2 lots there, lot 1 and lot 2, whether we have Valley South Industrial Park is available. This is in the Auric zone. The other property was in the industrial zone. This area is allowed for educational use, but it is a conditional use. So we are going to have to get conditional use approval. But also there's a lot of those uses that we went through in that previous table, listed as accessory uses that are allowed in the Auric zone. So we also are going to have to ask the zoning hearing board to allow those uses as part of what we're proposing to do. So we're going to go through what we're proposing on that. Lot one is, both of these are part of the industrial park. They're combined will be about 7.5 acres of property. The access to it is from Industrial Drive. In the Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park does have a number of existing warehouses already constructed in the property, and there some research properties in there. What's proposed over here is initially what we were looking at is more of the younger students. We're looking at a combination of buildings that, the footprint right now that you're seeing on the screen there is about 38,300 square feet, but on 3 levels. We'll be looking at, combination of, a gym and cafeteria on the west, and classrooms and office buildings in the middle. And we'll also be looking at, some daycare and stuff. So we're looking at generally the possibility that this building can be occupied by up between 800 and 1,000 students in the age 2 to 18 age. We're also looking at the possibility of having some apartments type units for staff, dormitory units for boarding of students. If we get students in, if they get students in from other areas. In conjunction with that, we are looking at enhancing the area along Albertus Road, but that we won't be allowing students out in the front of the building. We do have an enclosed playground on the west end of the site. We are taking the rear of the building there and doing that for more horticulture, agricultural use in the buffer. We'll get, is buffer around the property right now, but we're going to be enhancing that with additional, and then in the rear, we're going to have some outdoor dining area, outdoor seating area for the students. And you can see we have a bus drop-off area. We have a car way-off area. In the next slide, you can see the overall view. What we're planning to do with this, some of the important facts. We didn't bring this up. We didn't make this clear in our original presentation. We're looking at making these driveways coming off Industrial Drive as one-way driveways. The west driveway will be one way in, and the east driveway will be one way out. That will make it easier for us to be stacking the buses, stacking the cars as they come in. We'll also be looking at having a location for our EV charging stations along that center island that we have, where we had the green space in the middle. We're going to have handicap spaces down along the front, near the building. We'll also have areas in there for drop off for if we have the daycare facility. So we are going to be looking at that type of thing. If you noticed when we were talking about the uses, they do plan to have retreats and stuff here. So that was one of the reasons why we have these shelters. That we may have the time they have retreats, they may have a shuttle service between the two campuses. Take people from parking here over to the other campus. This shows, the first, we haven't developed full elevations or full building design for this, but what the intent is that we will carry the same architectural features so that if you're driving down Albertus Road, you'll realize that this is part of the same campus. So you can see that we have taken architectural features from the master plan that we have for the East Campus and carried them over onto the West Campus. See components that were carried over and being used, like the gym will carry over part of the that one look. We have that the area with the cafeteria in the center area from the main phase 1 building. We carried over to the center part of this, the area from the gym, from the one dormitory area will be carried over to where we have the auditorium and the possibility of dormitory area over to this building. So you can see that, the intent is that this building would be very similar, same, have high level materials and be done to be compatible with buildings that are being done on the East Campus. The uses as shown on the next sheet are similar, what they want to do is be able to have the same type of uses here that they have on the East Campus. We don't know, this is going to be something that's going to be dynamic. It's going to change as they're growing. It's going to be, dependent on, what the needs are at any particular time. So they want to get permission that they can utilize either campus, as a whole. So that if there's a need for something at one campus and they can fill it at the other campus, they want to be able to do that. So that's why we want to get approval for this, all these accessory uses, to be able to use them on this campus also. This next shows some of the design companion items that you want, that you're asking for with the project. And a couple things to point out here is that we are going to be using, doing some of the horticulture type items. We are going to have raised plant beds. We're going to be doing some training. We're going to have orchard trees that are going to be part of the buffer area. We are doing decorative paving. We're going to have arbors. We're going to have, out there areas. There's going to be a lot of more architectural features that are done, and we are going to be enhancing the streetscape along Albertus Road. But we said we're going to isolate that from the students. Students aren't going to be allowed in the front of the building. We want to keep them away from the traffic out on Albertus Road. The playground area will be totally enclosed, so for security reasons, and that'll be enclosed in a security fence that you can't, like we've been doing for daycares and stuff, that you can't see into that area. There's been some question about what are we going to do with pedestrian conductivity. We are proposing to put raised crosswalks in across the intersection of Albertus Road. This doesn't quite show the crosswalks, but we are going to do raised crosswalks across the north link and the east link of the intersection, and we will approach PennDOT about putting the pedestrian crossing signs with the rapidly flashing strobe light type crossings, like we've done over at the Buckeye Building. So as we're moving forward, we don't expect a lot of crossing, but we do want to have something to safe when we do have people, and when they have retreats, if there is people that are going to be walking from side to side. Also in conjunction with this, as I mentioned before, on the other side, if Atlanta is going to be having bus service out here on Albertus Road, we will look at putting bus stops on each of these two corners, on the northwest corner and the southeast corner of the intersection here as part of the campus. One thing to be noted from a traffic standpoint, when Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park was done, there was a Jandal project, and part of the traffic improvements that they were required to do for the project was to relocate Shonik Road. Shonik Road previously came out to the area just south of where the southern part of the road where the circle is here. And that's on the southern part. That's in an area on the south side of a vertical curve. And the site distance was very bad at that intersection, if you're familiar with it. And there were a lot of accidents at that part. And as a result, when the project was originally done, trucks were banned there until Jandal completed this relocation to Shonik Road out to this new intersection with the traffic lights. So some traffic improvements and stuff were already done with this project. And Lehigh Valley South Industrial Park, as shown on the next slide, we will have more traffic with, if we did consider this to be a typical school, we would have actual more car traffic, but we won't have the truck traffic that we would have if this was, a light industrial project. We would estimate that we would probably have, possibly as many as 44 trucks with if we had a manufacturing facility here, we have a per day. If we have the school facility here, the only trucks we're going to have are the ones that are needed to bring in garbage trucks and also to bring in food and stuff for the cafeteria. So as we mentioned, when we started this, they have an agreement of sale to purchase this property. They're in their due diligence period. They would like to get the conditional use approval and their approval for these accessory uses so that they know they can use this property prior to them having to close on the property. So that's the reason that we'll be back in front of you next month to ask for your recommendation. Then we're intending to go to the zoning hearing board in September to be able to acquire those approvals. Turn it over to you now.
Now you can ask your question.
Yes. Who wants to start?
I
Wait.
can. I do have a few questions. One about the phasing with the parking lot. So I'm gathering that you want to continue, start having classes and start continuing usage of the property in the school. So you're going to have a temporary parking lot. Well, what are you going to do with the parking lot when you're building the underground parking lot?
We will have some parking on, there around the barn area. There'll still be some parking there. Then also by that point in time, we anticipate that we will have some parking on the other campus, on the west campus.
And there will be a shuttle that'll go from that parking lot. So what would that shuttle route look like?
When we did the first building, when we did the prayer room and stuff, and what we have in place right now, for when they have their worship services, they have an agreement with the church in Albertus that they can shuttle people in. That, and I guess you have vans available to be able to do that, and they'll probably do the same type of thing when they do the shuttle service here. They'll have vans that will run between the properties.
One other question, deliveries. Where are the delivery trucks going? Is there going to be loading docks? Where's that going? Where are they-
When the first building's built, there's going to be areas underneath the building where, and where the elevators are, there's an elevator complex right next to where the cafeteria is going to be, and that's where.
That clearance will be high enough to do, because sometimes this is pretty large, so I'm assuming there's gonna be either box trucks or I have a fairly small community that I run, and we have pretty large Cisco trucks that come in to drop off food.
Yes.
Or tractor trailers, are they gonna be able to go down in there?
Yeah, we're planning to have clearance for the stake body type trucks to be able to get into that underground area. I think if you look at that pamphlet, I think we are figuring like 12 foot 6 inches clearance for underneath there so that you can get trucks for that one area.
No, my-
I'll piggyback off of one of them. So the frequency, it sounded like frequency of people using that crosswalk, your feeling is that it's limited right now. But what is that, like, what is the total number of people that you would expect to be crossing?
I don't have a good idea at this point in time. I would think the times that it's going to get used the most is when you have retreats, John, isn't it? When you would have, if you have a weekend retreat or
Can you-
something
yeah,
like
the
that.
microphone.
Yeah, I would say that it would be for our larger gatherings. So up until now that the Friday worship that we have, the current parking that we have suffices. So there might be some people kind of at a midday Friday. Right now, our Friday prayers are at 1:15 to 2 o'clock. So that could be a potential time on a weekly basis on Fridays. And then our weekend retreats, we run roughly every 2 months.
Okay.
So I would imagine that it wouldn't be too frequent.
So currently, what is your number that you think that would be? And what would be hey, this was the most successful thing we surpassed what we expected? I just trying to get a number. Are we looking at 15 people or are we looking at 1,500?
Oh, no. I think our occupancy is like 187 or something, like a 178 or something. So I think on a good day, we have a good solid 120, 130 people for like our Friday prayers. Yeah.
Okay, so that between 1 and 2 o'clock. And so that number split in half, you're saying, because it's 2 phases, or is it all of these same people are coming, you're replicating that twice?
So I didn't understand the question.
So you said I think you said the Friday prayer, there's like a 1 o'clock and a
Yeah,
2
so
o'clock?
no, so there's one prayer. So there's 1:15 to 2 o'clock. And that
45
would
minutes.
be an option, that some mosques do that when they don't have the ability to house everybody. At the same time, they do offer multiple Friday prayers, but right now one suffices.
Okay,
for-
I thought, I just thought. I
Oh,
heard you
no,
say
no,
that there's
just
two.
one. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wes, that will change as things move forward. That's, that's the occupancy they have in the prayer room presently. We're expanding the prayer room, but there is parking on the site right now. I think we have 32 spaces or some right now on the site, so they can park some of the people on the site, and then they can shuttle people in from that parking lot that they have at the least at the church. And with the they are going to be doing the expansion of the prayer room, and they have, they're going to be getting additional parking off-site available that they have zoning approval for to use right now.
And actually just to follow up further. So is the thought that those are mostly adults that are crossing with family, or is it at a time when, so the school is also using that same space? So would kids be crossing?
We'd have to really think about that, but I would imagine for safety, it would make more sense to run a separate prayer on site for kids. Right now, the need is so small that we didn't have to think about that yet, but that would be probably the more reasonable thing to do, is that if there is 200 kids in the building, to have them walk across would not make sense. It would make more sense to have a space there as well where they could just pray on site, and we could operate another prayer on the other side if it expanded to that extent.
For the West Campus. It's single phase, correct? It would all be done at once. I didn't see anything spelling out the exact phases, correct? Did I miss that?
I don't think we got that far yet.
Okay.
They want to know if they're going to be able to.
Right, if they're even
You know,
able to do it.
does it make sense for them to buy the property? If they can't get the
Right.
conditional use and the use is approved, then it doesn't make any sense for them to buy it. So I don't think they've developed plans that far yet.
Let's go to the easy one. Is it realistic to do it in one phase based on the other projects
To
that?
be perfectly honest, I think you're talking about another, 80, $100 million project. So it probably does not make sense to
Yes.
do in one phase.
So if I go way back, I think you said you became a 501(c) in 2013. So, I mean, we're 10 years in. What's a realistic timeframe? And obviously you're passionate about it. Of course, it feels totally realistic. I mean, what are we looking at? Because a lot of these temporary things is, I think, where some of our concern, you've already heard that. I mean, temporary for 10 years isn't that temporary, if it's temporary for 1 year. So what is a realistic timeframe? I mean, it's taken 10 years to get to this point. Are we suddenly now it's going to get more rapid, or is it still, this takes a long time to raise $100 million?
Absolutely. So when we talk about 10 years, that's from the time we were incorporated,
Mhm.
and that we didn't actually purchase the first of the two properties, I think, till late 2015, if I'm not mistaken, or was it 2014, 15 maybe. And then it took another several months. So we've purchased these properties over time, and I think that we've, shown that there is a good amount of growth. And I think it is worth, this is kind of along the same topic, the reason that we have our sights on this property that's catty corner to us is we were initially thinking that as we build the seminary, that we would repurpose the current facility that we have, which is the main prayer space and we use for our retreats and other activities for a school. But as we were seeing the school grow, we're like, hey, that makes sense to kind of plan towards the future. And then the second reason was the parking. It would be great to have an amount of parking so that we could limit the underground parking if possible. That's not the ideal, but if that's what we have to do, we have to do. So those were the two main reasons we were looking at the property. Excuse me. Catty corner. So if I talk about a realistic timeline, one thing that we know for sure is that the East Campus is more of a national project, whereas the West Campus will be more of a local project in that it's a K-12 school. Now, if we add the boarding element, which I think would be extremely unique, I don't know of a single that Islamic boarding school for the high school age. That's that interesting idea. We're really entertaining that. I do think that there'd be a lot of interest, which would kind of change that dynamic. But that means, though, because we're a nonprofit, the donor base would be different. So it's really hard to say with this how long exactly it would be. From our end, we're moving full speed ahead, that we're hoping that we can do this as fast as possible. And we do have course reporters that are well-to-do. So I don't think it's far-fetched. It's just a matter of getting the phasing right. I don't have an exact number because we're relying ultimately on donations. But when we talk about the school element, I think that opens up a whole other door too for government funding for charter schools and things of that nature. It actually might be easier to come up with a good portion of that than even the seminary.
And Wes, as far as the module units and stuff, I think we only really need that for, till we can build this phase one, the first phase of the master plan on the East Campus. So I think we have a time frame pretty much for that. You know, I think they're looking at 3 years to raise the $30 million that they have to do for that, and then a year or two to build that facility and then move into it. So, and they're probably, till we get the approvals in place to be able to put that module unit in place is probably going to be 2025. So we're probably talking, about a 3-year period that will need the dormitory, units over a 3 to 4 year period. That
Yeah,
will
I
need
mean, I
dormitory
recognize the
units.
complexity of all of this stuff, but at the same time, as Nate had mentioned, it's to represent future projects and how
Right.
do we treat them? You guys are here a lot. You want to be treated the same way each time so that it feels like a very fair process. So
Mhm.
Yeah, and one of the important things that, to note that we've discussed is, they want to have a good looking facility there with these module units for the dormitories. So, they're gonna have to probably go out and find special units, and the rental rate's gonna be higher, and they're not gonna be able to get something and probably rent them for just 1 year. So they're probably gonna have to rent them for like a 3-year period of time, so that, if we can't get the permission to rent them for a longer period of time, we're gonna have more difficulty getting the units to start with.
of course, things like the soccer field and some of the other fields that are other items that were proposed there, will those be, I'll call them community, they'll obviously be used for your school, but when school's not in, will they have a community element? Would that be something that, like the local youth association would use
Yeah,
those
yeah, we
fields
would-
as well?
We would very much like that. So anything sports related, we'd love to have archery fields, soccer fields. Unfortunately, we had to rule out the horse stables, but that would have been very nice.
Mhm.
But that even the gym, and that we're at one time in the plan, actually, there was a swimming pool on the bottom level. I don't know if we'll be able to do that. But the idea of the gym, which I have a full court basketball court, which was my passion, that can be converted into maybe an indoor soccer, if you will, or indoor hockey. But yeah, the idea that would be open to the local community as well.
So these would become, for the lack of a better term, a community resource. Like if
Right.
someone not connected to the school in any way, but the youth association that's in the area decide,
Right.
hey, these would be a great place to have additional basketball games on Saturday mornings.
Correct, exactly. And the idea behind that is that there's really, I'd mentioned previously 2 communities just in terms of the educational breakdown. But ideally, we want to design the campus so that the full-time students kind of have their own space. The part-time students, i.e. those that come in for seminars, those that come in for weekend retreats, that they kind of have their space, and then the local community. And there might be places that they converge, like the cafeteria, like the gym, but to design it in a way where, the flow of people moving to different facilities is very smooth.
And in all of the traffic studies, those are a completed project, or are those just what the first phase is showing?
The traffic numbers that we gave you for completed, for the entire phase for
Okay.
400 students on the seminary on the East Campus, and for 800 to 1,000 students
Okay.
on the West Campus. Now those are based on
IT,
ITE
yeah.
standard numbers, and like on the East Campus, if students don't have vehicles, they're going to be much less than that. But we wanted to give you, normal statistics, just so you had a starting
Yep, a
point.
good baseline. That's good.
When we get into actual land development, we'll get into more detailed traffic studies and give you more realistic numbers based on what we think it's actually going to be, based on, comparisons that we can do, or, projections based on, the conditions, the actual conditions that we think we're going to have on campus.
No, all that makes sense to me.
It's very ambitious, but.
Very ambitious, yes, to say the
One
least.
one other thing about the property that we had discussed is that, we're very much open to, one of the things that we very much live by is that we want to be very well integrated into the local community. And, we regularly have visitors of different faiths that come to our property. The Shalom Sisters, for instance, have events from time to time there. We've had visits from the local Girl Scouts. We're very interested in using the auditorium and other aspects of the campus to contribute locally and with the local school district, even in things of this nature. And then even the property itself, we're very open to seeing that what that would look like if we, on that other 13 plus acres that did have paths and things of that nature, to also have the general community benefit. We're very much open to that conversation.
Any additional questions?
A lot of my questions were already answered and asked by you, Martine and Wes. So going back to the east campus, you said that there's a dormitory element to this. And is there a commuter element to this, or is it everyone is using the dormitories?
Commuter, you mean coming from like a 2-hour distance or something like that?
Not using the dormitories, coming every day to use. the
So
facility.
primarily that right now we only really have the cottage, which is what we call the cottage, which is the building that furthest east on the property, and that only holds 5 students. So thus the idea of building the apartment in place of that, which in the short term would give us, I think, 21 students or maybe 17 students. I forget the exact number. So our greatest need right now as we expand is the dormitories, classroom space, and office space. So thus the idea to have some type of temporary ability to house students or have other office or classroom space with the temporary buildings until we finish the barn and so forth, which will give us an additional 6 spaces that primarily for classrooms, but maybe also for like office space.
Mhm.
So now, as of now, we have a few students that live on site. We've also that purchased a house that in the local Albertus community, which I live about 3 minutes from here, from the site, where we house the females. That's where the dorms are, and then the men are on site. And then there's a few other students that live with their families because the whole family moved into the area. So currently, we just have students that are on site that actually live here or that have moved into the area that are living in the female dorm or living with their families.
And I think what Ryan's also asking though, like in your expectations in the future, is there going to be primarily a component that those who are going to be there are going to reside on campus if you're able to build enough housing for them? I think
Yes.
that's a little bit where you're
So,
at.
so that's the idea, is that the ideal would be is that the students are solely on campus. So the situation right now is not ideal. We ideally want all of the seminary students to be on campus.
Okay, but the K through 12 across the street,
That would be different, yeah.
it's more of a charter school that,
It would be more of a charter school, but we would definitely entertain the idea potentially of a boarding school potential.
okay,
Yeah, boarding kind of like the Hills School has, yeah.
okay. I'm just trying to understand it sounds like there'd be a lot of people at this site at once and just the traffic flows. And I know that road gets very busy with trucks and just people going between Macungie and Albertus and, okay, that's fine. Another concern I had was the overall schedule with the temporary relocatables. I think that was answered a few times. I know, Nate, you said that the zoning requires extension, anything over a year. Is that true? Is-
Yes.
Yeah, so a
Does that mean-
temporary use is considered up to a year. And that's one of the things that I had mentioned previously that we're going to try and figure out how to navigate because, the ordinance states what it states and we would need to figure out with phasing how that would be employed, interpreted, handled, because it's new.
Does that mean every year they have to reapply?
Well, the purpose is to go to the zoning hearing board to get the relief now so that you don't have to reapply every year for something to be temporary again. So that's sort of what that the discussion has been with township staff is, so if we went to the zoning hearing board and said, we want a variance from the temporary status of a year to allow for it to be blank years, how does that incorporate into the phasing? When does it start? When does it end? With the understanding that the township doesn't want it to be temporary forever. And so, but in the same vein, the applicant doesn't want to have to every year come back to the zoning hearing board and say, can we have another, can we have another year? So it's trying to find something in the middle that allows for the phasing, but is something that the township would find acceptable, that it's not too long of a time period in order to allow that to be, stay as a temporary nature. Because,
Okay.
but otherwise you would have to do it like you're saying, you'd have to come every year and say, can I please have? And then you run the risk, what happens if it's, denied and now you have these temporary structures. So they're trying to find a middle ground
Right.
there.
I guess I'll let you, Nate, handle that offline.
Yeah, we're working with the zoning officer, the township solicitor. We are looking for the best way to potentially handle the situation as far as the ordinance goes. So we can report back.
And we can definitely tell you from our end is that we also want to use them as short a time as possible. We have no vested interest in having temporary buildings for a long period of time. So that would be in our own interests, the more, as Brian was mentioning, the quicker that we could raise the funds to move to the long-term plan is really what we want. This is just in the interim period that if there's a need, that was the ideas.
Mhm. And I appreciate that. I just know that a lot of other organizations have those intentions and then the 20 years old. So
Yep.
the last concern I had, which you answered, was the pedestrian crossing. I appreciate the shuttle aspect of it. And I just, when you go through PennDOT, I'm interested in what they say because having a lot of people, potentially children crossing that street, knowing how fast people go, knowing the truck traffic, that's just my biggest concern. But it sounds like for the most part, your programs are pretty separated, except for perhaps prayer time and, using the soccer fields and stuff. So I don't have anything
Right,
else.
I'm not seeing students crossing the street much at all there.
Okay.
Unless, I think mostly if you do see students, maybe if there's something going on over on the East Campus that they want to take them over and they may shuttle them at that point in time. I think the main people that you'll see using, going from the one area to the other, maybe like staff members or something that will park on the West Campus and walk over to the East Campus.
I think
And
we're-
some of that is all going to depend on PennDOT.
Mhm.
We're gonna have to show that we have a certain amount of pedestrian traffic before they allow us to put those flashers in. And they may not allow us to have the flashers. And they're gonna make us look at about a traffic volume out there. We may get to the point that we may have to have a traffic signal and do the hand-man indications at the intersection instead of doing the flashers. So that's all gonna come down to future when we get into developing further with PennDOT, what's going on at the intersection. But no matter what we do, it's all going to depend on future volume of traffic and future volume of pedestrians.
Mhm.
I think regardless of whatever the situation ends up being there, I think that will continue to probably be at least from the township engineer and staff perspective, we just want to make sure that that intersection is safe as possible for everybody. That's our number one goal. So we know because we traverse it regularly through our inspections and traveling throughout the township, there's a lot of truck activity, there's a lot of vehicular activity. And if this is going to be a truly a campus, we just want to make sure that everybody can travel freely as safely as possible between both ends. That's generally, one of the major things we look at is health, safety, and welfare. So that's at the top of the list. So obviously, if it comes down to it, we'll be supportive in partnership at any point in time on whatever is necessary. We're working with the powers that be to make sure that we get the best possible and safest facilities in there at that intersection. So.
Anyone from the public have a comment? All right. Next step, table it. I don't think there's any other questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're at the point right now where we wanted to make sure that the planning commission was aware of the use and the proposal. This is first blush for some of you, and we really appreciate the presentation by the applicants this evening to bring everybody up to speed. I think what we would do is revisit this again next month with the potential for a recommendation and further discussion.
Yeah, because the zoning won't be till.
Right.
Next.
Perfect. All right. Call for a
Yeah,
motion.
if anybody has any questions or anything, then if it may be wise if you let us know what you would like us to present next time, because there's no sense us going through this whole
Of course.
presentation
Right.
next time, but if
Yep.
there's questions that come up in your mind between now and then and things that you'd like us to present, you let us know and we'll target our presentation based on that.
Compared to previous boards that have sat here with it, which have been here for a very long time. It's a lot of new faces and also just, I think there's a lot of institutional knowledge that the previous board brought, so we're all still learning. So,
Mhm.
yeah, we'll try and come with questions in advance. So,
The only one we bored tonight was Mari, because he's the only one that lived through it before.
Yeah.
yes. So, we'll ask for a motion to table.
I'll motion.
Second that?
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have three
Thank you.
ayes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Next item is department report.
Yeah, as we discussed at last month's meeting, we continue to work on that draft version of that official map. But beyond that, we don't have any more updates for everyone. We've been working fairly closely with other staff members on project closeouts. One thing that I think is helpful to tell everybody about now is how we get to a point where a project's been constructed and we're still holding the security that we hold for it. We're working hard to close those out because, as everybody knows, we've approved a bunch of projects recently. So we're trying to make room in the pipeline for everything. There's a lot of things under construction in the township. I'm sure as you drive around, you can see a lot of things getting underway, or they've been underway for a while. So I would just note that's going to continue for a bit. Yep. And if you have any questions, let me know. Our anticipation for next month will be what was tabled here this evening and potentially one or two other items. So we'll probably have another full agenda for you.
Good. Got it? Yeah. All at once, right? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
All right, we have a second motion or a discussion. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. See everybody in September. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Get the official